In the CIA, he will recruit you.
Why me? You're agile, athletic.
He will train you.
Nintendo.
He will push you.
Reach the parking lot with an asset who intends to have sex with you. You want us to pick up a girl? 5, actually.
He will give you everything.
If you are caught, you're dead.
Except a way out. Al Pacino, Colin Farrell.
You want answers, you're in the wrong job. I only have secrets.
The Recruit. Rated PG-13. See it January 31st.
Welcome everyone to Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. Today we are tackling a very strange case of a movie that you may not remember that has a video game adaptation that you definitely don't remember. We're talking about The Recruit from 2003. We're going to get into that and just remind you exactly what the hell this movie is. I am the metaphysically wrinkle-free Steve Guntley, and who is joining me today?
I'm Jay. My dick is on fire. J-Ban. That's a direct quote from the movie. In a very tense situation.
Hi, I'm Justin, and my dick is not on fire.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad that cleared up. I'm glad you're doing better. Yeah.
For that one to sink in.
Sorry to put that out into the world. I apologize. Yeah, a very weird one we're talking about today.
Just reminder, Justin is single.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to put this on my dating profile.
I found from personal experience, if you put podcaster on a dating profile, that I think the app actually just screens you out automatically. I think they just go like, oh, yeah, no, this is an unlovable human being. We'd best move on.
Like board games, video games, improv, and podcasting.
Yes, we get it. You're white. Thank you. Yes, we know. Yes. Yeah, a very, very weird one today. This is a movie that is just like the epitome of like a January release that gets totally forgotten. And it's a game that technically does not have the license to this movie, but still carries the same exact plot. And it's a very deeply strange game on top of all of that. So I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, like what's really funny is I actually remembered the twist, or quote unquote twist, from this from watching it in like 2003.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was so funny rewatching it and just being all like, I was just like, it really failed to sort of like keep my attention, which is unfair in a lot of ways because I love Al Pacino.
Sure.
I think Colin Firth is an amazing actor. Firth. Sorry, I rewatched Pride and Prejudice this week.
Oh, we get it. You're
BBC.
white. Okay, we know. We get it. No.
Are we the whitest group ever?
Hey, Pride and Prejudice goes like for Pride and Prejudice is for everyone.
Yes.
So is Limp Bizkit.
No, they are not. They are for no one. But yeah, no, I this is one of the rare movies I have not seen for the podcast that we've been talking about so far. So this is a first time watch for me. And I don't know about y'all. Whenever I tell people the premise of this podcast, like they always ask what kind of things we cover. I'll toss out like a recent episode, and they'll be like, "I had no idea that had a game." This is the epitome of I had no idea that had a game, because this is also I had no idea this was a movie. I mean, maybe Gotcha has been more obscure of the films we've talked about.
Yeah, but Gotcha was very entertaining.
Gotcha was entertaining, but this one is almost
Are you
as
saying
obscure.
that that's in contrast to this movie?
Like the Recruit is almost as obscure as Gotcha, but it's 20 years later, so it has
I don't
less
know
of an
if it's obscure. It
excuse.
did make 100,000 million million at the box office.
It did well. Yeah, it's one of those movies. It just did secretly well.
Very big stars.
Yeah.
And it was a success at the time.
It was. Well, let's get into it. This movie is called The Recruit. It was released January 31st, 2003. It's directed by Roger Donaldson, and it's written by Roger Town, Kurt Wimmer, and Mitch Glazer. And it stars Al Pacino, Colin Farrell, Bridget Moynihan, and Gabriel Macht. Yes, there basically are only 4 characters in this movie, which makes it pretty easy to narrow down the different mechanics of this. So this is kind of the pinnacle of the I didn't know they made a game of that. It's a pretty forgotten kind of espionage potboiler that somehow made its way to profitability. The reviews were pretty mild, and its cultural tale is pretty much nil, but it kind of has a game adaptation. The movie's real only legacy, I think, is kind of as an early test balloon for the career of Colin Farrell. All right, so Colin Farrell had an interesting career around this time. He sort of just arrived. You know, he's one of those actors that people were very resentful about, similar to Tom Cruise when he first started, because he didn't really go through the grind that a lot of actors go through. You know, most actors, you've seen them in like bit parts in like half a dozen movies before this. Colin Farrell and Tom Cruise were the case of 2 people who were just like, oh, they're in one movie, they popped really hard, let's make this person a movie star. And I think people tend to bear a little resentment about that. His first kind of breakout role was in this movie in 2001 called Tigerland. I don't know, has anybody else ever seen Tigerland?
I haven't seen Tigerland.
It's an interesting movie. It's similar to this movie today because it's all about a training facility, you know? So this one's about soldiers who are training to go to Vietnam. And it's not a very good movie, but he's very good in it, and it's clearly like, all right, this guy's got a little something, you know? So his first American films were Heart's War and American Outlaws, and they were kind of flops. But between 2002 and 2003, he had a string of kind of modest hits. He was in SWAT, he was in Phone Booth, he was in Minority Report, he's in Daredevil.
We'll go to bat for Phone Booth.
I kind of like Phone Booth. I rewatched Phone Booth recently.
I really liked Phone Booth so much when it came out. I haven't rewatched it in like the years in between, but I remember watching it and being like, wow, this man is an amazing actor. It's like he's just stuck in a phone booth the entire thing. It was like, it could have been a play on TV, on the stage. It was just like so, like, it was, I liked it so much.
It's an 80-minute movie that's mostly just him on screen and Kiefer Sutherland's voice, you know, and it works. I think that movie is kind of a good, like, low stakes test of, okay, is this guy a movie star? And I think he is, you know, like, I think he really sort of shone in that little movie. Daredevil, he was actually supposed to play the lead in Daredevil at first, and he thought the villain character was more interesting. We'll get to that movie eventually, but he is the best part of that movie, I would argue. But yeah, I think it was becoming one of these guys that was sort of being shoved down your throat a little bit, you know, like sort of like Jude Law around the same time, where he's in like 6 or 7 movies and people are like, okay, well, I guess this guy has to be a movie star, you know. But people were getting a little bit sick of him. And so I think they wanted to pare him back and try to sort of relaunch him as more of a supporting role again, opposite like a established movie star, you know. And so they brought in Al Pacino, who, you know, obviously Al Pacino, a 70s icon who had a pretty disastrous run in the 80s. He had like 3 movies in the 80s and they were all horrible. But then in the 90s, he kind of started coming back. He got 2 Oscar nominations in 1992 alone.
Son of a Woman?
Son of a Woman and Glengarry Glen Ross, and he won the one for Scent of a Woman.
You know, I've never seen Glengarry Glen Ross. I've only seen the coffee scene on YouTube.
Oh, sure.
I feel really like I really like Mamet. I mean,
yeah.
Mamet's problematic, but
yeah.
I like his writing.
I like that movie a lot, but it's also one of those movies similar to like Fight Club or Wolf of Wall Street, where you have to be very clear about like why you like that movie, because it's a very hyper masculine. Like you talk about that coffee scene, like the Alec Baldwin scene. You talk about that, and people are taking that as like, oh, this is what I should be like, as opposed to this guy's a fucking creep and an asshole, and like he's what's wrong with the sales industry, and you shouldn't want to be like him. But
you mean to tell me you're not supposed to scam people and take all of their money just so that you can buy a new car?
Not necessarily.
When you already have a lot of money.
Not necessarily, you know? Yeah, you would think so. But yeah, so then he was a lot of roles in movies like Heat and Donnie Brasco, The Devil's Advocate, The Insider, Any Given Sunday. He had a really good 90s. And he was starting to play more and more like of this sort of mentor role like he's playing in this. Like they're going to take Pacino, who's tried and true and like a really respected actor, and we're going to pair him up with whoever the next hot guy is. So Donnie Brasco, they pair him up with Johnny Depp. In this movie, they pair him up with Colin Farrell. He does one called Two for the Money. They pair him up with Matthew McConaughey. You know, so they're kind of escorting him into that.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to officially apologize for how many times I'm going to call Colin Farrell Colin Firth.
Yes.
Throughout this production.
It's just on the tip of your tongue.
It's on the tip of my mind. The beautiful Colin Firth. If you haven't seen the BBC Pride and Prejudice, it's on Hulu. It's time for a rewatch.
I call that an ex-girlfriend movie because every one of my ex-girlfriends has made me watch this. I've seen those many times. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying they're the cause of my relationship ending. I like that miniseries. I'm just saying. So far, Ailish has not made me watch that Pride and Prejudice. I think I'm going to be worried if she ever asks me to. I'm like, oh God, here it comes. But yeah, so this script had been floating around. It was originally called The Farm, which might have been a better title thematically, but it's also similar. It has a similar SEO problem that I think The Recruit has. It's hard to Google this movie. It'd be hard to Google The Farm as well. It's directed by Roger Donaldson, who's just this Australian, like, kind of journeyman director. He's got a couple of, like, mid-level hits. He did Species, which is a very campy movie I like a lot. He did Cocktail with Tom Cruise. He did Dante's Peak. A couple of, like, sort of mid-level movies that don't really have a strong director signature to it. And this wound up being a minor hit. This opened number one when it was released. It made a healthy $100 million off a $45 million budget. Reviews were kind of lukewarm, but most agreed that it was kind of a cut above, like, the average. There were a lot of these kind of spy thrillers around the early 2000s, and they were all similarly sort of forgettable. Like, I would take this movie over, like, Spy Game. Did you see that one with Brad Pitt and Robert Redford?
Probably.
See, exactly. It's that kind of movie. This is a probably movie. Like, all of these are just like, oh, did you see it? Yeah, probably. Seems like a kind of thing I would have seen.
What is I can never say, is it Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy?
You got it, yeah.
Oh man,
you nailed it.
That's a great spy movie.
I have not seen that one yet.
It's
I gotta
so
get
good.
to it. I think I keep getting put off by it because everyone's description is like, it is so good, it's so boring. Like, they say that with equal enthusiasm in the same breath. It is so good, it is so boring.
So I love costumes, and so I think that any downtime in the in that movie was probably my attention was riveted by Savile Row suits.
Yeah.
So like I never thought it was boring, but I also do know that I can get quite distracted. Like Marie Antoinette. I can't talk about the movie because I love the costumes too much to even like. It's like
can't even criticize.
I can't criticize the movie. I'm too distracted by the beauty.
I like that movie a lot. I don't know. Like you can. It's probably not above criticism, but I like that movie a lot. But yeah, so this is just kind of one of those movies that sort of showed that, all right, Colin Farrell can be a box office draw. But then his career kind of went in a weird direction after this.
Alexander?
That's the thing. That's the big one. So, yeah, Daredevil was kind of a stinker, and Alexander and Miami Vice were two, like, big flops that he starred in after this. Alexander is the most notorious one.
So, I think Alexander... So, this is the issue that I think everyone had with Alexander. And everyone still does this problem, and I think it really detracts from movies, is that they cast Angelina Jolie as his mother, and I think she was maybe 2 years older than him or 2 years younger.
Yeah, they're probably very
I think
close.
she was like, so she was either the same age or a couple of years younger, and it made it seemed super incesty.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing had like this there was no maternal affection about it, and I think this is a problem when people cast women who the same age as the male protagonist, because it just gets weird and like incesty.
Would you be surprised to learn that we're going to cover that movie? They made a game? Yes, we are. They made There's a PC game of the Oliver Stone Alexander film. Now, it may be lost to time, but it does exist. It did exist at one point.
That's amazing.
I've never seen that movie. I've never seen it. I've heard I've heard crazy things about it, but yeah. So he had that. That was kind of a major issue. He also had pretty well documented issues with drugs and alcohol around this time. He was in the tabloids a lot. He was kind of like this brash young Irish actor, and people were ready to hate him. He went into rehab. he met Martin McDonagh, the great Irish screenwriter, and he becomes Martin McDonagh's muse, basically. His performance in Bruges in 2008 that's the first movie that made like, oh my God, Colin Farrell is fucking amazing.
So I've recognized Colin Farrell's amazingness earlier, especially because like in something like Phone Booth.
Yeah.
But In Bruges, I have such a difficult relationship with In Bruges because I, as I've discussed previously, sometimes have a hate relationship with mob movies.
Yeah.
And the movie is spectacular, and especially the other male lead in that, I have such a thing for
Brendan
because
Gleeson.
he's
Yeah.
such a good actor.
love Brendan Gleeson so
There's
much.
a movie about him in Ireland, and he plays a police officer.
Oh,
Garda.
the Guard.
The Guard.
Yeah,
Oh,
amazing
it's
movie.
spectacular
Him and Don
movie.
Cheadle. That movie's phenomenal.
Spectacular movie. And so I like the movie, but it fills me with like I feel dirty watching it because I hate mob movies so much.
And that is about as dark as a comedy can get while still being like, I think that movie's outrageously funny, but it's also like children get murdered in that. Like people commit very graphic suicide in that movie. Like they really go hard in that film, but it's incredible. And I think Colin Farrell's just had an amazing, like, sort of underrated character actor run since then. Like he was in that new Batman movie playing the Penguin under completely unrecognizable makeup.
He's unrecognizable.
He's so good in that movie.
He's really good, but also just hire an actor that looks like that. You don't have to cover up Colin Firth's pretty face. Like
Farrell.
Farrell. So,
Everybody do a shot.
I already apologized.
Everyone at home do a
apologized in advance.
Did do it. Oh God, we've made a drinking game.
But yeah, I mean, and then, of course, Banshees of Inisherin came out last year, which I thought I really was pulling for him to win the Oscar off of that. I really wanted him to win.
I still need to see that. I really wanted to.
In addition to my rewatch of Pride and Prejudice, I'm also rewatching Lord of the Rings extended version.
Oh.
And my flatmate says, we haven't started this drinking game, but it's a drinking game you should have when you watch the extended cut. It's basically drink every time you see a meme.
Oh, yeah. That'll happen quick. Same if you're watching Futurama. You got to be careful. Like, yeah, you got to be careful with that game. Yeah, but I mean, Colin Farrell has definitely graduated to, like, just such a high level. He's like one of my very favorite actors.
It's so
I don't
interesting.
think I've seen many movies that he's been in. I've been reading Wikipedia articles on him and the surrounding cast this whole time.
Yes.
Because like Al Pacino I know of, but
Yeah.
Colin Farrell I'm like, I know I've heard the name, but what were they in that I saw?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because Al Pacino was in such spectacular movies, but he's also in such creepy movies like The Devil's Advocate at this time.
Yeah. And he's in this same year he's going to be in Geely. Did you see that movie?
No, I did not see that movie.
That movie is absolute wild, crazy movie. Like, and he's got a very weird scene in that.
How old is Al Pacino?
He's 83. He just had he and Robert De Niro both had children this last year. They're both in their 80s and they had
I
children.
remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward to being 83 and having a child.
Yeah. Yes. You have that luxury. It'll happen. Yeah. So I mean, we notice we've kind of avoided talking about the movie all this much because we're just it's more fascinating as kind of a pit stop on Colin Farrell's career. Also, it must be said, you forget how hot he was at this time. He's a very hot man in this
He is a
movie.
very attractive
Yeah.
man, but it's always so funny that they put him in all these American roles when his Irish accent is ridiculous.
He's got the best accent.
Wowza.
And everything I've heard about him too, like since he got clean, is just that he is the sweetest dude, and that he's a dream to work with. He's just really polite to everybody and like very genuine. And so I wish nothing
Okay.
but success for him.
But to talk about the movie,
Yes.
this is really interesting because have you did you ever think about going into the CIA or the NSA or anything like that?
No.
I
come
mean,
on.
as like wild fantasies as a child, maybe. Seriously, as a young adult, no.
Okay.
I almost joined the Air Force, but that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
I came to Austin instead, and here I am.
I mean, I never had any kind of proclivities for like the military or like or spy work or anything like that. Like it always just looked like a pain in the ass to me. Like I love spy movies, but it always looked like a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, my goal was to do like technical work, like IT or something similar. I was
okay.
like, I'm not I had tested high enough on all the pre-tests that I was like, all right, I'm probably gonna be fine with whatever I pick.
So you wanted to be the guy at the computer monitor with the earpiece going, all right, you've got 2 bogeys on your 6.
Yeah, that's
Take the left alley.
100%.
You want to be guy on a computer.
I wanted to be the guy in America who doesn't go do anything interesting.
You want to be Melissa McCarthy in Spy.
So
I didn't want to be
Colin Farrell
Ooh, put that drink down.
started off as a hacker. It was really funny, or not a hacker, but as a software engineer,
a
computer
cool
scientist.
guy, computer dude.
Which was so funny because the only experience I have with ever sort of being recruited was my high school chemistry teacher's son was in the NSA, and he came to our chemistry class to talk to us about joining the NSA.
Yeah.
And
That's wild.
But he's not allowed to say anything about where he works.
I love that that's...
you can say you work for the NSA. It's not illegal to say you work for the NSA.
I love that we're at that point of where they're like, I'm going to get these kids to join the NSA in a chemistry class.
You're 15 and you know how covalent bonds work. Have you thought about government work?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a single downward slide. That's exactly where you're going to go with that.
You're using a calorimeter. Do I have ways for you to use some calories?
Have you blown off your eyebrows?
Hydrochloric acid, you say?
We're looking for a spy without eyebrows, and we think you're going to be great for it. Yeah, so Colin Farrell opens the movie as this genius computer programmer from MIT, but when we first meet him, he sleeps in. He's late because he's genius, but he has a chip on his shoulder and he likes to box.
So I've mentioned this, I think, on this podcast before, how I hate when women are late for things. And so when I see men being late for things, I'm filled with both hate and yeah.
And what time did you get here today? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, who was the last one here?
Hey, that's not a part of my character development.
No, that's just a part of your character.
Arc. It's not your arc.
Look, I'm usually the one sending the, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late.
You know why? It's because I had to watch the movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay, is this the point where we drag Justin under the bus?
No,
here?
I'm not at all. Not at all.
I think we have to drag him a little bit. Somebody did not watch this movie.
I was playing I was here. I was playing the game, and then I was like, I didn't watch this movie. What am I doing?
You were looking for similarities. You're just oh yeah.
No,
yeah.
I was just no thoughts, no brain, play game, and then I was like, oh right, this is technically work we were supposed to do.
Yeah,
I was supposed to watch this movie. I prepared to watch the movie 2 weeks ago.
So if Justin is suspiciously silent during parts of this conversation, that's why we're totally dragging you.
I've read a few synopses, so I at least understand what happened. And then we watched the trailer, and I also understood what happened. I watched the trailer before I read anything.
That's the thing that kind of ended up, I think, pissing both me and J-Ban off, because we watched the trailer and we're like, this kind of gives away the whole movie.
The whole movie.
You kind of don't need to watch the movie.
Literally, straight up, the final line of the trailer is something to the equivalent to the meaning of sometimes the person you can't trust is the one who brought you into this in the first place. And I'm like, so Al Pacino's the bad guy.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna front load that right now. You know how we know Al Pacino's the bad guy? Because within the first 20 minutes he says, "Don't trust anybody." All right, that's the movie rule. If in a mid-level kind of spy thriller like this, that's always the rule. The other rule is the killer is going to be the most recognizable person who's billed third or fourth. Mm-hmm. All right, and in this case, there isn't really anybody. Okay, because the whole cast is. We have Al Pacino, we have Colin Farrell, we have Bridget Moynihan, and we have Gabriel Macht. Those are the 4 named actors who get a title card in the credits. The rest are just kind of Canadian character actors who don't really have many speaking lines.
Take that, Canada.
It was filmed in Toronto, which I was really appreciating. There's something I think is really funny about all of the Toronto and Canadian filmed TV series is that they're always wearing coats and it's always gray.
Yeah,
and you're just it's just this is what Washington D.C. looks like.
Yeah.
You watch.
This is Virginia.
Yeah.
This is Virginia. You wear a coat 24/7.
Man, this right away, this movie was like really bringing me back to this very specific time in movie history where like there are a lot of these sort of mid-level espionage thrillers with like bigger names than you probably need. All the music is always like
And then depending,
and there's a blue filter on
So
everything.
it's not an espionage movie, but I love The Hunt for Red October.
Me too. It's a perfect dad movie. Like it's peak dad movie. I love that movie.
I think that this might be related to maybe like Mission Impossible syndrome.
Sure.
Where like the first Mission Impossible movie hit big enough, and then the second one, because then I think did the second was that 2003?
It was the second one was 2000. It was a huge
2000.
hit. It was a
Okay.
huge hit. So.
They brought in Limp Bizkit to do the
You always bring it back.
Always bring it back to Limp Bizkit.
But no, and I thought that was interesting because just in the trailer there was that interesting mix of like tense like spy thriller music with like kind of underlaid hip hop beats. And you're just like, yeah, this was spy movies in 2003.
Well, it's funny. We look at a movie like The Recruit, which
Yeah.
is just like you sort of like forgettable, and then you compare it to Jason Bourne and Mission Impossible, which have had these huge franchise
Yes.
histories.
Yeah. And this is just a movie that doesn't have really any kind of cultural tale. But I am going to give some credit where it's due. I really liked the first half of this movie because I really like a good training movie. I
Yeah.
like a training movie more than I like a war movie or an action movie. You know, like the best parts of Full Metal Jacket is the first half when they're in the boot camp, you know, just like that. There's something about it that like being able to learn the language, being able to learn how much goes into like being put in this training. That being said, this movie was screened for actual CIA agents who reportedly thought it was a comedy. Because it was so ridiculous, because there's all these Byzantine lengths that they go to, because this movie's real twisty, you know, they're always trying to keep you on your toes, but you're kind of going to be ahead of the movie the entire time.
I think like the biggest thing is like I work for the state government. The CIA, regardless of its operations, is still a government agency.
Yes.
You know what you do when you first get hired by a government agency? Endless paperwork.
So much paperwork.
Endless training of being all like do 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 do, which is just basically sounds like that.
Yeah.
It's just endlessly boring, and I feel like this I feel like a CAA training movie that would be honest would just be exceedingly boring.
Yeah.
The intake forms, you're just like, God, I want to be done. Can I quit now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't get to do fun stuff like they're doing in this movie. All right, so one of the training missions.
Well, hold
that
on.
he sends-
Before we
Oh,
get too
yeah.
far, I have a question. Have you seen The Day After Tomorrow?
Yes.
Did you like it?
Define like.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's a movie I love because of how
Okay.
stupid it is and how much fun it is.
I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. And you were saying that you like the training parts, and I'm like,
Yes.
that whole movie is a training thing.
Kinda.
Up until like the last 20 minutes.
Do you know the best movie with the best tiny bit of training? Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah, that's
seen it.
They show it very realistically.
You haven't seen Silence?
Oh, man.
sorry.
Get on that
my
one.
Which one's Silence of the Lambs?
Hannibal Lecter,
Oh, okay, yeah. With
Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins.
yeah, with the guy who takes face. Was it?
He takes a face.
He
off in
takes a
that movie.
face and then he like lowers the bucket down. It's like she puts the lotion on the skin.
Yep. That's
Yes,
the
I
one.
have seen that one.
Okay.
I did.
All
I
right.
did.
Cool.
Okay, I rescind my
I
outrage.
just forgot the name of it.
I reaffirm your outrage.
Wait, I was like, wait a minute, things are clicking, gears are clicking. I think this is what I think it is.
We're never gonna get to those movies, but man, I love those movies. Yeah, you think there would be some kind of weirdo like video game version of Silence of the Lambs? I don't know
They
how.
don't
it really...
value female leadership enough to create.
It's true.
Damn.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the early part of this movie is just like this fun training montage where you're told like you can't trust anybody. So obviously you know you can. Colin Farrell shows that he's like physically agile enough to be good at this program. You know, he's starting to be a standout.
And apparently he's good at the shooty, according to the trailer.
Exactly. He's good at shooty, and he's good at jumpy through windy. You're dropping stuff all over the floor. That's Just
Distance.
we got some distance on this fidget spinner, which I am now claiming. No. Yeah, it's my fidget spinner now.
Wait, no,
This is
you
what
have to twist ties. Oh, God.
When you get 3 people with ADHD around a table, like we're gonna have to make eye contact with each other. We all go nuts.
I was about to start playing with the measuring tape.
Oh God.
I was like, what else is here that I could fiddle with? This lighter? I don't like fire that much.
A fire makes noise. You have to be silent fiddling.
That's true.
Yeah,
Fire
that's
makes
a
noise,
secret.
and I don't trust myself with fire in my hand.
Oh, we don't trust you with fire either.
Yeah, no, I'm
I
gonna
know.
drop it on me, and then I'll be fire.
All right, so one of the kind of little, I guess they're trying to make this sort of the fun moment of the movie is they're supposed to go, their secret mission. Al Pacino comes and gets the 5 boys and says, all right, your secret mission is to go into this local bar and pick up on a woman and bring her out, which is
Not
like
just one woman, 5 women.
You each need to get a woman, yes. And I don't know that that's necessarily a problem for Colin Farrell. Like,
Colin Farrell.
that's not really challenged. 2003 Colin Farrell could probably walk into most bars.
It
and
was
do
really
okay.
funny, like, because like even though like he's very attractive, like, but 'cause he like I do think you need to say more than one sentence, like me.
Yeah, well, he came in.
Maybe?
He came in with this rap of like he just got out of prison and is looking to just get that one
What?
thing. That's his rap, and it's working because he's
Wait.
very hot.
His opening line is, "Hey, baby girl, I just got out of prison."
Yeah.
Basically, yeah, and but then he gets kind of bamboozled by the female agent played by Bridget Moynihan, where she's acting like she just got kicked out of the program. She's sympathetic, and she's like, "Oh, I just want to get drunk and go home with the first person who talks to me." So she lures him out, and then it's like, "Haha, she got you. She's still in the training program, and you got cucked."
Yeah, that was apparently her objective, was to get him to fail.
The message is if you act like a decent guy, you lose.
Yes. We should take a
Wait, are you saying that in the sense that Colin Farrell was being the decent guy? Because he,
He was being
opened up.
no, he was being a decent. He was being decent. He
That's
was like,
true.
she was
I did
drunk.
see
He
that.
was getting a cab. She kept inviting him back, and she's like, "No, you're too drunk."
Well, and he gave up on picking up on the other floozy to help her.
She wasn't a floozy. She knew what she wanted, and what she wanted was Colin
losing.
Farrell.
Hey,
was freshly out of prison Colin Farrell.
you're just trying to keep people from doing too many shots right now. But like we should take a 30-second Bridget Moynihan break to talk about her. Her big thing at this point, I think she was better known just as like Tom Brady's fiance, right? Like I think she was in she was kind of in every newspaper all the time because she was with Tom Brady, who was at the peak of his
Are they still together?
football career. No,
Not peak of his football. He's had like a long career. I don't know.
Tom
if-
Brady's peak
that-
was like 15 years, wasn't it?
was that early in his career? Then I don't know.
Yeah,
football.
he's had like a 20-year career.
Okay, so it was fairly early. And she was a model, and she's this very glamorous, very beautiful woman. And like, I don't know, she was in a couple of movies around this time.
What
and
movies
then
was she in?
she was in The Sum of All Fears. She was in Coyote Ugly. She had a few others.
Shortly after she was in iRobot.
iRobot,
iRobot,
right?
that's where I
She
know
was in
her from.
iRobot.
That is where I knew her from too. Because watching the trailer, I was like, so familiar. I know I've seen her in something else.
There's a lot of actors kind of around this time who I'll go back and watch these movies. And I'm like, oh, why didn't they ever pop off? Gabriel Macht, who is also in this movie, is another one. I go back and look at their careers. It's like, oh, they've been on like some procedural show on CBS for 25 years and have more money than God. I've just never seen NCIS Sheboygan. I don't know.
Fun fact: she's been in one for 13 years now.
What has she been in?
Blue Bloods.
Blue Bloods,
Bloods.
yeah, which is
I've never heard of that.
That's a
My
Tom Selleck
mom
show,
used
yeah.
to watch that a lot, and I always remember going, I don't know who this guy is, but man, he's got a mustache. And then when I realized it was Tom Selleck, I was like, ah, yes, that's the mustache I was thinking of.
What is Blue Bloods about?
It's a police procedural kind of following, like Tom Selleck plays, I think, like the captain or chief. I think chief of like one of the New York precincts. And so it's following like a family of police officers and stuff.
So
Well, Gabriel Macht is kind of the same way because he was on Suits for years and years, which is one of those shows that apparently everybody in the world loves, and I've never seen a
Is
frame
Suits
of.
still a show? How long did that show run for?
It was off air. I haven't seen it, but it's off air. But they put it on Netflix, and then it blew the fuck.
It's
up
like huge
after it
on
was
Netflix right now. Yeah, people are really discovering it.
I watched a lot of the USA channel around that time, and so I always saw advertisements for it. But I was watching a lot of Psych.
I watched so much Psych. It's
I've never seen
ridiculous.
Psych. I watched a lot of Burn Notice.
I did watch
Burn Notice was fun.
I love Burn Notice.
You would like. I would say probably just start with the 4th season. You can go back and watch the 1st season, but like, just Psych is so good.
It's so good, and then they eventually get to the point of where like they had enough pull that they were just like. It's my favorite thing of when a show gets successful and you can tell they're having a good time still is when they're just like, yeah, I always liked this musician. Can we bring him in for like a cameo in an episode or something?
Sure.
And they're like, yeah.
Well, they kept doing theme episodes. Like they have a really great Bollywood episode and
love it.
like an Old West episode.
Yeah.
And just like it was just they after the first couple of seasons, they were just so successful. They just got to play around in this like ridiculous universe. And
It's
really
okay.
So good. And the comedy, in my opinion, is very much more up my alley, where some of it's more of like dry humor.
Sure.
It really just feels like a group of people who actually enjoy working together, kind of fucking with each other.
Okay, all right.
It's great.
I can get on board. I can get on board.
The general gist of the show is that it's a guy who is just really has a really good memory, very detail oriented, who then proclaims to be a psychic investigator to help solve crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
but
joke because
really,
it's the same plot as The Mentalist, but they did it first.
Yeah,
he's
And it's a
actually he's
comedy.
just a detective pretty much, but he doesn't act like it or admit it in any way.
Okay, all right.
It's great. It's such a fun show.
But I mean, that's kind of where I was getting at with this movie. Is it like we have 4 actors that have any kind of name recognition, and they're really the only characters that get any kind of development at all. So we know, like when we meet like the kind of like douchey bleach blonde like other guy in the recruitment camp who is like a rival with Colin Farrell, we know he's going to come back in some capacity. He's either going to be the bad guy, or he's going to be the plant, or he's going to be a red herring or something. In this case, he's kind of all 3. But really, the thrust of this movie is that like they stage this whole long kidnapping sequence where Colin Farrell is like tortured and beaten, and it's all staged, it's all fake, and like people are just sort of watching him. But after that,
It's real.
It's real.
They're
But
really doing it, but what he doesn't realize is that
it's the CIA.
It's
a test.
It's like an exam room, and his entire class is just like chilling out, like watching through 2-way mirrors and going like,
Yeah.
oh, interesting.
But this
There's
is all
nothing like
pretense.
creating a CIA agent by giving them PTSD.
Absolutely, they need to be a little traumatized.
If there's anything I learned from watching Burn Notice, that's part of the playbook.
yeah,
You can find somebody with PTSD, or find somebody and give them PTSD.
there you go, and that's a documentary. Yeah, that's a very true. Yeah. But I mean, this is all
So
really
true.
just a front to get him to quit the CIA, so they can realistically say, okay, he's no longer in the CIA. And then Pacino goes to him and says, all right, you actually passed. We want you in the CIA. We need you to pretend to be this low-level guy so that you can follow Bridget Moynihan's character. We believe she's a mole. We believe she's going to steal this virus called Ice-9, and he explains that's named after the Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle, which I just actually read for the first time last year. Ice-9, if you haven't read it, is a molecule that they use in that book.
Okay.
That's basically a biological weapon. Like any element it comes into contact with, it will instantly turn to ice. So if you add it to a single element of water, it's going to basically just make the whole world an instant ice age. And that's what happens in that book. And that's kind of the idea of what this computer virus does in this
Vonnegut
movie.
always has such interesting ideas.
Oh, I love Vonnegut. Yeah, absolutely.
I've never read a Vonnegut.
Oh, yeah, you should borrow one of my copies. I've got a couple.
I've read Slaughterhouse-5, but I've heard stuff about other ones, and they always just seem so... Yeah, just so interesting.
Cat's Cradle is great. Mother
Yeah.
Night is my favorite ever of his, but I read like 4 or 5. Yeah, no, Vonnegut's great. But yeah, so this is all setting up this idea that he needs to infiltrate the CIA as kind of a low-level like data cruncher and follow her around. But of course, they are all hot for each other, as we see with the lie detector scene, where he has to catch her lying about wanting to sleep with him. So it's all pretty creepy.
Does she fail or does she pass?
That scene is so misogynistic. It's ridiculous.
Who's asking the questions?
So she is strapped to the truth-telling machine, and it's like this little goggle that goes over her eye that's supposed to read like whether it's dilating or not, and it's going to tell by her heart rate. And basically, he's trying to humiliate her for picking him up at the bar. And he goes like, "Did you actually want to go home with me that night?" And like she says no and gets caught in a lie. And,
God.
But they end up flirting with each other and falling for each other, and then he's feeling all conflicted about his loyalties. Like, do I stick with the agency? Do I trust Al Pacino, or do I follow this woman I love? Ultimately, he decides like, I am going to stop her, but I'm going to tell her to run so she doesn't get caught.
I thought it was really funny how they were like, yeah, the CIA doesn't have disk drives. They have USB drives.
Yeah. It's a very exotic format.
And also, let me just tell you, as somebody who has worked for government contractors, has worked for agencies related to the government, you can block and monitor USB drives. It's real easy. I've done it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's usually what's done, especially at anything to that level, anything like research facilities, stuff like that. Yeah. You're not going to be able to, you shouldn't be able to get data onto a flash drive.
Yeah.
There's a process that you have to follow where you presumably have to, notify somebody for it.
I mean, there's a process for all of that. But
submit a request.
But either way, he goes to her. He tells her, like, all right, I'm taking this virus from you, but you go free, go free. He Harry and the Hendersons her, basically. He's throwing rocks at her. Go.
Have you ever seen Harry and the Hendersons?
I don't want you here anymore. Go.
Harry and the Hendersons is an amazing film.
So what you're saying is it's like the ending of The Fast and the Furious.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that.
Let me relate that to something I know.
By the way, I just want to jump in and say, if it seems like we're having a hard time discussing the movie, it's because that's the kind of movie this is. It's sort of ephemeral in a lot of ways.
It's so hard to pay attention to. And
this is stimulating the experience of watching this movie.
It's not, and it's.
I'm gonna go home and watch this movie.
You should.
It's got some really interesting writing choices. That the writing is like, it's not terrible. It's not too cliche.
It's slick,
but it's definitely like the exposition dumps. And they're like, oh, you're athletic, you're fit.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, are you hitting on me? Like, come on. And
I do like that little exchange. I know we're going back and forth, but I do like that little exchange where he's trying to recruit him for the first time. He's like, do I have to kill anybody? And Pacino just kind of cocks his head and goes, would you like to? I kind of like that part. It's a little
that
funny.
was in the trailer, and I was like, this seems so fucking weird.
Okay, again, backtracking. This is Pacino in like one of his less shouty later roles. He reached a point, I think it was probably around Scent of a Woman, where he just starts like shouting all his dialogue. And sometimes it's fine. Sometimes like in Heat, like it's a little distracting because like he shouldn't be going that big.
Was Scent of a Woman pre-Scarface or post?
Post Scarface. So I guess Scarface would be the start of it.
The name of that movie just sounds creepy. I don't know what it's about.
No, it's not. So
it's an okay movie.
Well, he plays a blind man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, there's a really great tango scene in it that I've seen multiple times because it's really
with Gabrielle Anwar from Burn Notice.
Yeah.
Incidentally. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
And so, but definitely he's a little bit. Again, I haven't seen the movie in like 20 years, but he's a little bit of a misogynist.
Yeah.
He's also like.
Isn't that like most of Pacino's?
But he's kind of a misogynist where it's couched as like he just loves women so much, but he kind of treats them like a wine.
Yeah,
like so he talks about their smell a lot. So that's kind of where it comes from. But
but
I just got the shivers from that.
You should watch. You should watch the tango scene. The tango scene is really pretty.
Yeah.
And also,
Are you
as a
saying that just
person-
because you really like dance?
No, so
No, it's good.
It also
Okay.
so I feel there are very few scenes in cinema that capture what it is to be a social dancer. And to be a social dancer, if you know how to follow, and you're like most follows are women, somebody can grab you and you can do a dance that you've never done before because you have these fundamentals, and so you have this magic of all of a sudden being gliding across the floor with a really great lead to a beautiful song that it's magic. It feels like magic, and I feel like this scene really captures what it is to be a social dancer and what it is to be a follow and to dance with a stranger that you've never met before and to create magic together. And so I really love the scene for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, all that is to say, I don't really feel like Pacino is phoning it in here. I think he's giving a pretty good performance. I think he definitely knows the level that this movie is at, but he's not embarrassed. I don't think Colin Farrell's embarrassing either. I think they're both bringing the right energy to these parts.
Is that kind of like the I don't know why I've always liked this quote so much, but it was in the first Star Wars movie where Mark Hamill was like, well, my hair should be all messy because of the last scene, the trash compactor, and Harrison Ford was like, kid, it's not that kind of movie.
Yep,
If they're
exactly.
paying attention to that, we're in trouble.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting. Colin Firth has a really great.
Take a shot. Okay, sorry. Sorry, I'm gonna stop picking on you. I will.
I was so trying. So Colin Farrell had this really great like early 2000s confused hurt face.
Yeah.
That he was doing all the time, and it was just like, and it's a very cute face, but he uses it so often in this movie. He's like, I'm confused, I'm hurt, I want your approval, because it's really interesting how they sort of create this parental dynamic, and I'm like, people who grow up without parents, I don't think they're this needy, but they try to present this image that they're like,
Did you just throw shade on orphans?
no,
Suck
they
it, orphans.
portray people without parents as like starving for a parental figure in this really unhealthy way. So I'm not throwing shade on orphans, I'm throwing shade on the movie.
Yeah, but that is something we didn't mention, is that Colin Farrell's been searching for his dad, basically. His dad died or disappeared back when he was a child, and so he's spent his whole life kind of basically searching for this guy, and Pacino is able to kind of coax him into the CIA by saying, your dad was a CIA agent. He didn't actually die in an airplane crash. Like he died doing a mission for us.
From what I saw, it looked like it was a little less direct than that, but
No, it was super direct.
was it
pretty
super direct?
Very
Okay,
direct.
It's pretty direct. Yeah, and so like they're obviously setting up Pacino to be kind of this father figure for him, you know, where he's gonna follow him blindly and just sort of accept him on his word. But of course, we, being movie literate, know that he is up to no good. So when he goes to finally like Harry and the Hendersons, Bridget Moynihan, she tells him like, look, you can look at my pupils because this totally works. You can tell I'm not lying, and you can see that I am just a regular CIA agent and you're being played. And this leads to this whole showdown with Pacino where he basically tricks Pacino into confessing live on the radio in front of the entire CIA. Like he thought he'd gotten away with it, but he winds up confessing and they shoot him to death.
But wait,
So,
he
it's a
thinks he
little bit more
confessed.
than that.
He thinks he confessed, but the software wasn't working. So
it just looked like it was working.
It just looked like it was working.
Yeah.
So then he comes out and he's like, "You got me," and he gives this big long monologue, a very Al Pacino monologue.
That's where he puts on the yelling. Yeah.
That where he puts on the yelling that we know so well, and then he's like, "Oh, you tricked me."
the CIA guys were like, we were here for the other guy. What are you doing?
They move the laser.
Just
things,
like-
like
Yeah.
Excuse me, what are you doing?
Like,
What do you
God
say?"
damn it, we have to shoot this other guy now. But yeah, so he gets mowed
he was
down.
doing it all for money.
You know, and then
Just like the rest of us.
they get him one last twist because Pacino was trying to convince him. He's like, I made up that whole story about your dad. He actually just was an oil executive who died in a plane crash. But then we get the final reveal after Pacino gets mowed down. Another CIA agent says like, "Hey, it's okay. You're just like your dad," or he says something like that.
It's like, you're really good at this. It's in your blood.
Yeah. So he was a CIA agent after all. Whoopsie. So just one more twist in there. I'm being a little dismissive of this movie. I think it is a very effective kind of middle of the road sort of potboiler, but if you have just the slightest bit of media literacy, you're going to be ahead of this movie, like right from the get-go.
Look, my experience with most spy movies, Gotcha included, is that they're usually not the greatest.
That's because you haven't watched Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah. Starring Colin Firth. Yes. You're good at that one, right?
This episode is just going to be called Colin Firth. Heart.
Yes. He is in that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
You go into the theater to see a Mission Impossible movie, and you're not going to see the most accurate spy movie ever.
No,
made.
you're not seeing actual crap.
No,
you're seeing,
you're seeing an action movie with a spy cover on.
And this one feels a little particularly silly in that regard. Like, I don't think they're really putting people through so many like hoops, of like trusting each other. But either way, like the CIA regards this as kind of a light comedy. But, regardless, this movie was a bit of a hit, but it didn't really have the kind of staying power necessary, which leads us to talk about this video game. All right. The video game is called Ice 9. All right. And it came out 2 years after this. It came out in February of 2005. It's developed by Taurus Games and published by BAM Entertainment. Now, this was being developed alongside the film. The intention was there was going to be a day-and-date release, but the film's release date approached and the game wasn't really done. So it caused a delay. And then compounding the issue, the film, which was successful, it wasn't a big enough hit to really make people believe that like everyone's going to come out and buy a game that has the Recruit on it, especially 2 years after the movie. This is not a movie with a cultural tale. So they dropped the license and they decided to redevelop the game without it. They changed the name of the characters in this game, but it's still basically the same plot. And so I'm kind of counting it as an adaptation. As even from the title, Ice 9 is, the name of the virus from the movie. There was also a PS2 version of this that was being developed. There's some footage that's available. It looks like a pretty bad first-person shooter. And that's the other weird thing we need to talk about here. This game is a first-person shooter on the Game Boy Advance, all right? And it's only on the Game Boy Advance. This isn't like an adaptation of a platform game that got like reduced down to a Game Boy Advance. This is a game entirely developed for this handheld system that can't super handle this genre. There are a handful of first-person shooters that are on systems like this, like there's a Doom and a Wolfenstein on the Super Nintendo, like you can go back that far and see it. Those games barely work. They literally work at like 10 frames a second or something like that. Like,
it goes so back to when we were playing the Die Hard game. Pre-joystick gaming was crazy. It was so weird to play most games.
Yeah.
And then like the Nintendo 64 had a joystick for GoldenEye, but it was still kind of wonky. It took time to get things situated. However, that was done before 2005.
That's the thing. This game came out when the Nintendo DS was already like 2 or 3 months old, and that system is slightly better for first-person shooters. It's still not like the way you necessarily want to play it, but it is slightly better. This game, it just, the biggest obstacle this game has is that it looks pretty rough, and you need to sort of dilute the experience of a first-person shooter to make it fit onto this handheld console. And that's the question of whether or not it's ultimately worth it.
So I have not had a viscerally negative response to a game this bad since E.T. The graphics are so bad. Like playing E.T. or Wayne's World or anything from like the 80s or 90s was so much easier than playing this. Like the pixels were so bad.
Yeah.
The artwork was so bad. And like the first person shooter was just like nonsensical. It was just like you start the game off and you're going through a recruit, like basic Men in Black style situation where you're shooting the bad guys and not shooting like innocent people, but the pixels are so ridiculous you can't barely tell the difference between someone who's armed and who's unarmed.
We were having that issue a couple times where we kept killing civilians because some of the men are wearing red shirts and it looks like they're clutching dynamite, or their arms are crossed across their chest in a way that makes it look like they're holding a gun. And because the graphics are so low fidelity, it's pretty hard to tell. Now, we played this two different ways. I've got it on a handheld, which I think worked a little better.
The handheld worked better and looked better.
And then I also put it on an emulator and like put it up on my TV. But this is not a game that is meant to be seen on a 70-inch TV. It's kind of a mess, and it's hard to look at when it's like that, you know?
Yeah. And their saving grace is that there is strafe buttons. However, for those of us who have played games before joysticks, strafe wasn't on a joystick. Strafe was on the bumpers.
Yeah.
And so I had to, like, my brain has, it's not like riding a bike. My brain has fully removed all capability to play like that anymore. And
it's hard to go back.
It is so hard to go back. But I will say, for the control scheme, they kind of made the best of it.
I think they do. And here's the thing. I played this game more than I thought I would. I was playing a little bit in advance just to kind of get a feel of it. And I don't know if it's just like me being obstinate with it because it was getting really annoyingly challenging and I wanted to best it, you know, but or if I was actually just enjoying it. But there's something about this was eventually clicking with me, despite how ugly and cumbersome it is. Like, it was starting to sort of work, but it was almost like in defiance of good game design. Okay, there's a level that we didn't even really get to as a group, but where you're supposed to.
I wanted to give that a try, but
you're supposed
got
to
sidetracked.
tail the female agent. Your mission on this perimeter is to shoot non-lethal rounds at everybody who's wearing red pants, because that's an indication that they're an agent. There's like 9 of them that you need to take out.
We all know you can only wear red pants if you are in the CIA.
Oh, absolutely. Anybody with red pants is in the
And
CIA.
Michael Jackson being in the CIA.
Oh my
We all
god!
knew it. We all knew it. He was a werewolf and he was in the CIA.
Wore
Yeah.
red pants.
Whoa!
Red pants.
Mind blown.
You're supposed to wander around this level.
Fred
like,
Durst wore red pants.
you go to
We're
hell.
just gonna name people who wore red pants now.
Yes, welcome to
It's
the Red
Fred
Pants
Durst in the
cast.
CIA.
Yes. Hey, he wore a red hat mostly.
Well, he did wear red pants at one point.
Okay.
Because he wore track pants for a little while.
I trust you on this. Yes. But you're supposed to wander around this level, shoot all the people who are wearing red pants. They'll put their hands up, and then you can tag the agent, and then you need to escape. The problem is there's a bunch of civilians milling about at the same time. If they see you with your weapon out, then you lose the mission. But there's no actual consistent way to tell whether they can see you or not. Sometimes I walked right in front of them and they didn't do anything. Sometimes I was walking behind them and they would flag me. Like, it wasn't really consistent, so I kept hitting the same issue. And I think that's the point I reached in the game where I did get past that level, but I'm now stuck on a level where you need to avoid cameras. You need to avoid seeing any of these cameras or having these cameras see you. But I don't know where the cameras are. I can't see them. They don't show up on the map. And you just need to kind of wander around and do trial and error. But it's also like the enemies are not moving in a consistent, like, recognizable pattern. So trial and error isn't really a good option either. You just need to hope for blind luck. And I don't know that this game justifies playing it long enough to get to that point where you hit enough luck with it.
I do think it's interesting that game company has a lot of games released. A lot of them were Barbie related.
Lots of Barbie ones. I think they might be the ones who did Elf, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. I think they did Elf.
But they looked familiar.
I will point out that by the time this was released, there was 2, potentially 3 Splinter Cell games already on the market.
Yeah.
You should have bought those instead.
And people did. This
Oh,
is
they
not
did.
a.
Yeah,
What year did Metal Gear Solid come out?
Oh,
The
God.
first one came out in
98 or something.
First one was 98. Yeah. Metal Gear Solid 2 was 2001. So that Metal Gear was already
Wouldn't
a
it be
thing.
great if the CIA believed that you'd be like, if CIA training included like being under boxes?
Being
more
under
than-
boxes, using cigarettes to find like laser beams,
So-
fighting giant mechs.
Me and my roommate were recently watching. So they had Star Wars: The Clone Wars the show, but they also made like a TV movie also in the same style.
Oh, it was a
that
movie
goes alongside
movie.
of it.
Yeah, no, it was released in theaters. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like a full 2-hour movie, and me and my roommate were watching it because we thought we were watching the series, and they absolutely hide under a box from the droids and then just kind of slowly crawl through them as they're marching the other way.
There you go. It works.
And I was laughing so hard. That's the type of shit that if it happens in a movie, even if it's the dumbest stuff, I'm just gonna be like, look, I get the reference.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
But I mean, that's a level of complexity you could manage if you're in a movie or if you're in a Metal Gear game, which is in 3D.
Not in the Game Boy Advance.
In a Game Boy Advance game, like I applaud them for having some ambitious ideas with this one and for attempting it. This is not the first person shooter on the Game Boy Advance. It's not the only one we'll talk about. We'll get to that eventually.
And
but
just to put like a slight bit of detail into this, it does play very similarly to how like Doom would play.
yeah.
You don't have to be super precise with your aiming. There's some auto aim involved. Sometimes in a bad way, because I definitely sprayed a submachine gun at some bad guy targets and a couple civilians died. So
Yeah.
That's what a machine gun does, Justin.
Yes.
And that's why if you're ever in a war zone or you're ever in a hostage situation, just lay down.
Yeah. Stay
Don't
down.
stand between two bad guys with your arms crossed.
Yeah.
And your sweatshirt
In your-
on.
I think that's
Your-
some victim blaming, right? I
Your
think that's
red
some
shirt
victim
that looks
blaming.
like dynamite. Yeah.
Look,
Just don't
I'm
be
not
low.
gonna say the joke. All right.
Just don't go into a hostage situation with low resolution and large
Yeah.
pixels, I think is the idea.
When you hear gunshots start, get down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not gonna,
Duck.
I'm not going to
I
keep
don't know, I
commenting
don't know.
on this. I don't like this
this-
tangent.
I don't
This is a
either
bad
because this is
tangent.
America.
This is a bad tangent.
Yeah, we'll take it
my
back.
alarm bells are ringing.
Yes, let's go back. But like, so yeah, I reached a point with this game where it's just like, all right, this is probably enough. But it took a little longer for me to reach that point than I would have expected, given the
Yeah.
limitations of it. Maybe there's a bit of nostalgia for me because I did grow up playing Doom and GoldenEye and things like that, where it is a first-person shooter that's in a much more limited controller and technological capacity. So you need to adapt. And that's sort of what I was doing here, and just sort of take it as part of the gameplay. But you do reach a point where it's just like, all right, this is just you're trying to cram a square peg into a round hole here.
And I think ultimately the biggest downfall is the resolution. It is highly pixelated.
Yeah.
And now this is 2005 on the Game Boy Advance, which I had and I played often. That screen is at least 2 to 3 times the resolution of what we were getting in the game.
Yeah.
And that's what made it so weird to me. Was I remember playing like Kirby. There was a Need for Speed game on the Game Boy Advance, and being able to actually make stuff out. Whereas here, it was. When we say pixelated, we mean it. Like,
yeah.
It felt like the SNES had better resolution than what this game was running in.
The whole thing looks like the White Stripes fell in love with the girl video that's being made out of Lego. That's what it looks like.
Honestly, yeah. And that, I don't know if it was just they weren't able to push the hardware well enough, either because of development inefficiencies, if it wasn't very well optimized, but that killed it.
Yeah.
That gave it no chance to be a good game. If it at least looked a little better, obviously they're not going to be setting records. It's not going to be like Red Dead Redemption 2 or something.
Yeah.
But it would have had a chance.
But it's
didn't.
ultimately just kind of a fascinating artifact. And if you find a copy of this in the wild, hold on to it, because this game has become quite valuable because, like we said, it came out 2 months after the DS came out. It was based on a movie no one cared about. It went under the radar, and it barely sold. So copies of this usually fetch like $200 or $300 on eBay. So definitely hold on to it in that regard. But as to whether or not you should hold on to it in your heart, well, let's decide that right now. Let's talk about our ratings on these movies and games. Is this a good movie, good game, a bad movie, bad game, or somewhere in between? Spew your vitriol, Jennifer. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
I'm going to say it's
I feel weird calling you Jennifer, by the way. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
it's a I'm going to say it's a okay movie. Yeah. And I'm going to say it's a bad game. bad game.
I don't know if you mentioned you were getting physically ill trying to look at this game.
I was just like, what is going on? It was just like, it was so horrible. Like, I enjoyed Wayne's World so much more than this. And like, I love first-person shooter games.
Yeah.
I really, really love them. And so to have something this incompetent and something that I love was just a real challenge.
That's fair. How about you, Justin? Where did you come down? I mean, I know you loved the movie, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not going to rate the movie for previously mentioned reasons, but I will say, again, it was a bad game, and it could have been potentially an okay game, but the texture, like the actual resolution the game was running in was just abysmal and made it so hard to play. Doom had more pixels than this did. Like it was so bad. But again, the gameplay wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
It just needed a little bit more fidelity to be playable. And it didn't have that. So
The idea of the game, the idea of going around shooting cardboard figures, that's been done a million times before and since, and this one has just done it abysmally.
now, in theory, eventually you shoot real people.
You do. It takes a weirdly long time before they start shooting back. I should mention that too. Like
It's because they make you play the training until you've like reconditioned your entire being to be able to understand and like make sense of the game.
Yeah.
Before they make it difficult.
And this whole time, like we said, this is hitting all the beats of the movie. They've just changed the characters and the setting and everything, but they are hitting all the beats of the movie. So
And after all, the important thing about the movie and the video game is that women are evil.
absolutely can't trust them.
I can't even talk to them.
Well, I'm going to come down a little soft on it. This is a bad for me, but I am a little soft on both of those bads. I think the movie is perfectly watchable. I think it's pretty entertaining for what it's trying to do. It's a mid-level entertainment of the type that we don't really see a lot of anymore. So, like,
I do miss this mid-level entertainment.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't watch that much because I don't I don't watch the shows on Netflix that have been sort of like I think have taken over this market.
Yeah, I think so.
And
Yeah, but it's a peak like January release. You know, it's one of those movies where like, all right, well, if you don't feel like seeing a lot of Oscar-y stuff, then maybe you just want to go watch like some relatively mindless action movie, you know, and that's what this sort of delivers. It has a pretty successful first half and then a pretty bad second half, and the game. You know what? I'm giving them a gold star for trying to do this. It's just ultimately this was never going to be a good fit, and the moments where it's playable and fun get overruled by the moments where you just sort of can't progress anymore because the limitations of the technology have intruded on the story. So that's sort of where I came down. It's a soft bad, but it is a bad. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to my co-host for braving the freezing cold weather out there. It is 20 degrees here in Texas. For people who don't think it gets this cold, it gets very cold here in Texas. So
This is more of a recent thing.
yes, it's kind of new. But next week you're going to want to tune in because we have an exciting one coming up. Another movie that you probably had no idea there was a game adaptation of because this one was buried on the PSP. We're going to be talking about Napoleon Dynamite, the hit 2004 indie comedy that became basically a 90-minute T-shirt printing factory on its own. There were just so many quotable moments from that movie. There is a game based on Napoleon Dynamite. It's released on the PSP.
I can
and we're
only
excited.
imagine it's equally as quotable with the same quotes.
Every bit as much. And I'm also excited because my old podcast co-host, Woody Siskowski from Ultra 64 and Wii Universe, he is going to be here talking about this movie with us. We're very excited to have Woody on, and I'm very excited to get into this movie and this game. So thank you, everybody, again. I now release you from your duties as CIA agents. Well done, everyone. And now the real game begins.
Is this when you betray us?
Yes.
Oh, no.
I told you never to trust anybody. That's by Al Pacino. All right. No, dude. J-Man has a Pacino. Can we hear your Pacino? You have one.
My dick is on fire.
That's not the Pacino that we were referencing,
That's it.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's Dave Pacino, but still pretty good. Pretty good. Dave
Earlier,
Pacino.
she was saying other things, and it sounded better. But
On that note, bye, everybody.